There is a type of person who walks into a room, says almost nothing, and somehow makes the most emotionally unavailable person in that room feel things they have spent years running from. They don't chase. They don't beg. They don't perform warmth or manufacture intimacy. And yet, the person who has kept everyone at arm's length, the one who flinches at closeness, who disappears when things get real, finds themselves inexplicably drawn in. This isn't a coincidence. It isn't luck. And it has nothing to do with looks or charisma or playing hard to get. What's happening here runs far deeper than surface-level attraction. It operates in the oldest, most primitive parts of the human brain, the parts that calculate safety, threat, and emotional risk before you've even formed a conscious thought. Today, we're going to talk about a very specific type of empath, not the kind pop psychology writes about. Not the overwhelmed, boundaryless person who absorbs everyone's pain like a sponge. This is a different kind entirely. And when an avoidant encounters this particular type, something shifts in them that they cannot explain and cannot easily undo. The question is, what makes this empath so different? And why does the avoidant, of all people, respond to them so powerfully? To understand this, we first need to understand what an avoidant is actually doing. Beneath the surface, beneath the coldness, beneath the "I just need space." Avoidant attachment doesn't develop because someone doesn't want love. That's the most common and most damaging misconception about this personality type. Avoidants want connection just as desperately as anyone else. What they have learned, usually in childhood, is that getting close to someone is dangerous. That vulnerability leads to rejection, engulfment, or emotional pain. So the nervous system builds a wall, not out of cruelty, out of survival. Psychologists call this a deactivating strategy. When intimacy gets too close, the avoidant's brain triggers a kind of internal alarm. Suddenly, their partner's flaws seem magnified. Suddenly, they crave solitude. Suddenly, they feel suffocated by the very person they were just drawn to. This isn't a choice. It's an automated defense system running in the background, one they may not even be fully conscious of. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people who pursue avoidance do so in ways that trigger exactly that alarm system. The more they push, the more they text, the more they express need, the louder the alarm gets. The avoidant pulls back harder, and the cycle becomes exhausting for everyone involved. But this particular empath type, they don't trigger the alarm. They do something far more sophisticated. And it begins with the way they see people. Most people, when they recognize avoidant behavior in a partner, respond in one of two ways. They either try to break through the walls with intensity and pursuit, or they step back in frustration and confusion. Both responses communicate the same underlying message to the avoidant's nervous system. Something is wrong with you, and it needs to change. This empath does neither. What makes them unusual is that they genuinely, at a core level, accept people as they are, without an agenda. They are not trying to heal the avoidant. They are not secretly hoping that their patience will eventually be rewarded with the emotionally open partner they've been waiting for. They are simply present, fully, without demand. Psychologists have studied what happens to people in the presence of non-judgmental acceptance. The research is striking. When someone feels seen without evaluation, without the quiet pressure to perform or transform, their nervous system literally shifts state. Cortisol drops. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher-order thinking, becomes more engaged. The threat response quiets down. For an avoidant, this is a completely foreign experience. Their entire relational history has been built on the assumption that closeness means expectation, that being known means being judged. When someone enters their life and dismantles that assumption without even trying, it is disorienting and deeply compelling. Here is something counterintuitive. The most effective thing this empath does is almost nothing. They don't flood the avoidant with reassurance. They don't analyze the relationship out loud. They don't chase after moments of warmth and try to hold them in place. They simply move through life with a kind of centered, unshakable stillness, and they let the avoidant come to them. This is not a technique. It is not a manipulation tactic wrapped in emotional intelligence language. It is an authentic expression of who this empath is. They have done enough internal work to know who they are outside of any relationship. They have a life, a sense of self, a capacity for solitude that isn't born from loneliness, but from genuine wholeness. And this is precisely what makes the avoidance brain take notice. Avoidants are, at a subconscious level, constantly testing for need. The moment they sense that someone's emotional stability depends on them, the withdrawal instinct activates. But when they encounter someone whose internal world is not organized around them, someone who can take them or leave them, not as a power play, but as a genuine truth, something remarkable happens. The threat disappears, and in the absence of threat, curiosity moves in. Neuroscience tells us that the brain's reward system is most powerfully activated not by certainty, but by unpredictability. A partner who is always available, always reaching out, always warm, the brain begins to tune them out. But a partner who is present without being desperate, engaged without being consuming, the brain stays alert, interested. It keeps returning, trying to understand. Now we arrive at perhaps the most psychologically significant thing this empath type does, and they often do it without realizing it. They reflect, not in the sense of mirroring behavior back, which is a manipulation technique, but in the deeper sense of seeing what's actually happening inside another person and naming it gently, accurately, without blame. When an avoidant withdraws, most people respond with hurt, frustration, or pursuit. This empath does something different. They might simply say, "It seems like you needed some space. That's okay. No punishment. No hidden guilt trip. Just an accurate observation, delivered without emotional charge." For the avoidant, this is extraordinary, because for the first time, someone is not making their withdrawal about themselves. Someone is recognizing what's happening without turning it into a crisis. And that recognition, that quiet, accurate witnessing, begins to erode the wall. Carl Rogers, one of the founding figures of humanistic psychology, identified unconditional positive regard as one of the most powerful healing forces in human relationships. He found that when people feel genuinely accepted, without conditions, without pressure to change, they paradoxically begin to change. They soften, they open, not because they were pushed, but because the need to defend themselves disappeared. This empath is not practicing Rogers' theories consciously. They are simply living them. And the avoidant, who has spent a lifetime braced for judgment and pressure, doesn't know how to defend against someone who offers neither. But here is where we need to slow down, because this dynamic, as quietly powerful as it is, carries its own complexity. This empath does not have infinite reserves. They feel deeply, they absorb more than they show, and because they do not perform their pain, because they don't collapse or explode or demand, it is easy for even a well-intentioned avoidant to mistake their steadiness for invulnerability. Researchers studying emotional labor have found that people who regulate their emotions most skillfully in relationships often receive the least acknowledgement of their own emotional play. Their competence becomes invisible. Their struggles go unnoticed because they manage them so gracefully. This empath can fall into a quiet kind of depletion. The avoidant begins to open, slowly, haltingly, in ways that feel monumental to them but may feel insufficient to someone who has been patiently holding space for months. The empath can begin to wonder whether they are being seen at all, whether their own depth is being met with anything close to what they are offering. This is the moment that determines everything. Not the avoidant's first opening, not the moment of initial connection, but this moment, when the empath must decide whether they are showing up for a real relationship or for the idea of saving someone. The healthiest version of this empath knows the difference. They understand that they cannot pour endlessly from a cup that is never refilled. And they know, with a clarity that is quietly devastating, when to stay and when to walk away. There is a profound psychological irony at the center of all of this. The avoidant spends years perfecting a system designed to keep people at a safe distance, and then they encounter this empath, someone who never tried to break through the wall, and the outer wall begins to come down on its own. Not because the empath dismantled it, but because they made the wall feel unnecessary. That is the real power here. It is not magnetism. It is not a strategy. It is what happens when one person's emotional security is so deeply grounded that it creates space for another person to be unsafe, uncertain, and human, without consequence. The avoidant does not fall for this empath because they are exceptional. They fall for them because, maybe for the first time, they feel what it is like to be known without being hunted, to be close without being consumed, to be themselves, defenses and all, and still be chosen. And perhaps that is the most radical thing one person can offer another. Not pursuit, not pressure, not the promise that they can fix what's broken. Just the quiet, unwavering message, I see you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. But I'm also not waiting forever.